Okay, so good evening everybody. My name is Rodrigo Nascimento. I work for a company called Demon Solutions, and we are actually specialized on cloud DevOps, performance engineering. So we help many clients on a journey to migrate things to the cloud or build new things in the cloud. And today I will share a bit of my experience with compliance as code. Which one? That one. So I will just start with a brief definition of compliance as code, just for us to be in the same place. For me, it's basically the process of codifying all the internal and external standards of organization. That can be your industry standards, can be security standards, it can be your internal standards, and then we can automate the identification and probably remediation of any compliance issues that you have. I try to simplify the stages in dealing with the compliance as code by trying to identify if you have any non-compliant resource within your infrastructure, then doing a notification and remediation of the issue. I try to list a few benefits that we have with the compliance as code in terms of central management. You could have like a tool. I will give an example later in one of the use cases where we use a central management tool. So that will usually enable you to have central management of the of your rules, of your reports, and etc. And that, of course, can increase your visibility. And the visibility not only from the central management perspective, but also with compliance as code. As you're dealing with code, usually have that, for example, in a repository where it can be searchable and can be also reused by any project within your organization. Usually you can see by using some compliance automation mechanisms that you improve the quality of your deliverables. I think most of the talks before, like Bruno, João, and Urbano, were talking about that. And of course, that when you have your security rules within your compliance as code, you can actually expect your security to improve as well. And again, usability by actually using the code. There's also some cost benefits as you actually test and stuff, or you're checking your resources before you actually deploy that to production. You're avoiding any disaster that you could have with your brand or any rework costs and things like that. Again, this is for me is one of the main topics around compliance as well, because compliance is not only checking stuff. Urbano was talking about and how you align that with the business, etc. I think I tried to come up with a very simple kind of diagram that we could actually see how we actually define the need for the compliance rules, and they are usually based on requirements and use case that comes from the business, and not only functional, but they have also the non-functional requirements like your security, performance, and etc. So from that point, you derive, during the specification, you can derive your compliance rules that can be applied in the three main stages. Of course, that depends of your delivery life cycle, but I try to consolidate that to be a bit more neat, where you should apply your compliance rules from the development perspective to your build and deployment, and also monitor that to see if you have any configuration drift during the after you deploy the resource to production. And at these three stages, you always need to actually produce reports that can be used in your feedback loop to your requirements and use case in case you need to adjust your code. I put some examples of compliance as code tools, so I actually have way more than that. And to be fair, there are some other things that you can use from the simple test tool than to more complex stuff like cloud custodian and inspec. I'll actually give some examples based on inspec and cloud custodian today. So let's see a couple of them. The first one is a use case where we've done an AWS image production automation. So it's pretty much the same that Bruno was talking about in terms of we try to come with an immutable infrastructure approach. So we wanted to get some benefits from that approach. And then we try to, again, codify the image build, and we run that through this process, through these three stages to build the image. So have the build stage, where at this specific case we were using Packer to create images, and Puppet to actually do all the internal configuration from the virtual machines or the images. We've chose that because we use both Linux and Windows on that environment. And then we came up with another way to test, where we used Terraform to create and destroy the environment, so we could instantiate the image that we created at that point in time into a test environment, and we use inspec as the compliance as code tool. So we define all the compliance rules in inspec, and then once the image is up and running on that test environment, inspec goes and runs all your scripts against that instance and verifies if everything is fine. In case of non-compliance, we need to use the feedback loop, go back to the code, fix that, and run it again. In case it's all okay, then we go to the publish step. In this case, what we have an environment to create the image, and the image is only available in that specific environment. Once it's approved, then we share that image across all the accounts within the organization. So all the other teams can use that. It's a kind of a certified image to be used within the organization. The second use case is a bit more complex. It's more from the infrastructure management perspective. So one of my clients had like a lot of accounts in AWS, and then as we start to grow, we had some challenges in terms of making sure that everything that is being deployed on AWS was compliant with the standards of the organization. So things like security groups that didn't have any ports or any IPs open to the world, or certain ports not open to the world, and things like that, or S3 buckets with public access and things like that. So we decided to use an approach that AWS came a few months ago, probably last year. There's one service called Security Hub, which is a centralized, which is a tool that you can use to centralize your compliance management as well. It does a lot of things, but the main thing is that it tries to find, it runs some policy checks in your resource, and there are a few plugins that you can use along with that to identify non-compliant resources within your infrastructure, and then it will bring that to you as a report and a dashboard. There is one topology that can actually centralize all your accounts into account findings into a single account, and that's called the master member deployment, or master member accounts. So where you have a security hub in your master account, and it is connected to all the other security hub into your member accounts of your organization. So every time that you find a non-compliance rule here, or non-compliance resource here, it will automatically share that finding with the central security hub. So the first step was basically to identify. So if you come back to that 3 steps that I showed at the beginning, the first one was basically how we can identify the non-conformant resource. we used a tool called Cloud Custodian, which is basically, we can classify that as a compliance as code or policy as code tool, where you can define all your policies in a YAML format, and then it will automatically deploy all the necessary resources on that cloud provider that you need to check the conformance of your resources. In this specific case, every time that you define a policy on the YAML format, it will basically create like a Lambda function and a CloudWatch event that will try to monitor all your resource, and that can be by periodic or it can be based on an event. And if it finds something, it will log that into your local security hub, which in turn will send that to your central security hub. So then you have that identified and logged as a finding. The next step is notification. So once the finding gets into the master security hub, we put a CloudWatch event. We actually monitor that as a CloudWatch event, and then based on some rules, it will basically it will send that event to a SNS topic that will basically inform will send notifications in email format or SMS. It depends on how your subscriber is actually configured for that topic. And the last stage is the remediation. And the remediation can be manual or automatic. In this case, we also used Cloud Custodian to define the remediation as well. And that basically creates a Lambda function into your master account, so that can automatically react to a new finding, or in Security Hub you have the option to select the finding and the respective action that you want to apply to that finding. And then based on the resource from that finding, it will go to the respective member account, and will fix that resource on that account. It's basically assuming a role on that account and then fixing that. So next time it checks, it will be okay. And I think that's it. I tried to keep that on 10 minutes. Hopefully I went well. Thank you. Thank you.